It's certainly an honor for me to have this opening keynote conversation with the fabulous award winning author, Tayari Jones. Her forthcoming book, 10, is slated to be published by Knopf in February 2026. Tayari's novel brilliantly spotlights the lifelong friendship, starting when they were in the cradle, y'all, between Vernice and Annie, who are motherless daughters. Bernice's auntie took care of her after her mother was killed by her father, and Annie's grandmother took care of her after her mother, who has a substance use disorder, handed her to her mother and took off. Bernice and Annie end up going on two entirely different journeys, but a devastating situation brings them together. I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but I will say this. The ending is quite unforgettable, as is the entire book. I mean, I could not put it down until I had finished reading it. Even then, the story and characters stayed on my mind. So, Tayari, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here. Let's start with those two main characters. So we have Vernice, aka Niecy, aka Country Mouse, aka Mouse, and also Annie. What do you hope your focus on relationships adds to the conversation about mothers and daughters, or mother figures, friends, and lovers?
I was interested. I feel like at some point, most women writers get to a point where you want to write about female friendship. Like, this is such a core part of our experience as women. However, it's not talked about as much. It's almost like our friendships are not the real relationships. Our real relationships are with our husbands, with our partners, with our kids. But these female friendships often can last from cradle to grave. And so I feel like it's underexplored. And I wanted to just look at the way that women, not just the ways that we hold each other up, but the way that we shape one another's lives.
Speaking of holding each other up, I know you're a Spelman grad.
I
Uh,
am.
and your imagery and depictions of Spelman, and as well as other parts of Atlanta and Memphis, are so vivid and multidimensional. They're like characters too. So, how important was it to include real places along with the fictional town of Honeysuckle, Louisiana?
Well, I really wanted to write about Spelman College in the 1950s because I read a book called A Mighty Justice by W. Johnson Roundtree, who went to Spelman in the 40s. And even though I'm a Spelman graduate, when I was a freshman, part of my role was to be historian, for the group because we had to do like this history Jeopardy thing, and I was in charge. As a somewhat nerdy person, this was right up my alley. But reading A Mighty Justice, I realized how much I did not know about the history of not only Spelman College, but HBCUs in general. Like, I feel like Spelman has been put to the world almost like it's like some kind of debutante factory. But really, so many of the young women who came to Spelman in the 40s, 50s, 60s, they worked as domestic servants to earn their tuition. So they would go work as maids during the day. And then on the days they weren't working, they would take classes. That is a proud lineage that I think has been lost. So I wanted to talk about not only HBC, people sometimes think of HBCUs as like where the middle class lives, but I think that in many ways, HBCUs are where the middle class was made.
Oh, I like that. Well, you brought up history. So and you do have historical aspects to this book. It's set in the Jim Crow era. Did that take you down a rabbit hole, or did you use oral histories, or talk to us through your research for this book?
Well, one, I've moved back home to Atlanta and I have a lot of older folks in my life. I'm 55, so a lot of people who, not only my parents, but people who were kind to me when I was a girl are now, in their 80s, up in their 80s, and they've told me stories about their lives during the Jim Crow era. And what was really interesting to me is how the Jim Crow was happening, but it was not what their lives were about. Like people still had a full range of life, even in the face of segregation. So part of the balancing act for me was you want to make sure you talk about the significance of this era, the significance of segregation and how it affected people's lives. But at the same time, help people understand that racism and segregation is not our lives. Like we don't wake up in the morning and go engage with some racism. We wake up in the morning and have coffee, talk to our family, and then we might engage with some racism, but that's not the only thing we do. So trying to balance that was tricky. The most fun part of the research, actually, just like in life, wasn't the segregation research. I had such a grand time looking up what people wore in the 50s. This is a strange detail, but y'all, women wore some truly complex undergarments in the 50s. And I had to think about like what that meant as being so just trussed up under your clothes. Like here you are looking like a regular person, like looking like we may look now, but just the layers, like even the pads people wore under their arms so that you wouldn't sweat because a lady does not sweat. And looking at that in an African American context was also very interesting. The way that Black women were so committed to this ladyhood and how it was really a double respectability is a double-edged sword.
Was that the most fun part of the book to write?
No, the most fun part is when they go live at the sharecropping whorehouse. I had a ball there because also the most fun parts of stories are when you're around the characters who don't obey the rules.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So, without giving any spoilers, what was the hardest part to write?
I think the hardest part for me was writing the kind of sadder or more tragic parts of the story. As a matter of fact, when it came to my revisions, when I was writing the book, like one thing you know that if you have a character who says, my family made their money in the funeral home business, we're the biggest funeral home family in the South. Well, you know, somebody in this book is going to die. And
Yes, yes.
you can't just have someone saying, we do funerals and there's no funeral. So I knew that someone was going to die. And when I wrote the first draft, I chose a minor character because I
Mhm.
did not want to hurt anybody that I was really attached to. But when I had the minor character as the one who died, I felt like the reader would say, "Hmm, that is so unfortunate." But you don't go 300 pages to say, that was so unfortunate. So I had to break my own heart in order to finish the book.
Well, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but when I did get to who died, I actually cried. You made me cry.
I was right there. I was so devastated by it. But also, I think that when you feel devastated by what happens to a character, it also means that you had pleasure and love, just like in real life, grief is proportional to attachment and love. I feel the same is true for fictional characters, but I
That's
didn't
true.
want to do it. I didn't want to do it.
Well, I think your readers will appreciate what you did. Your structure is I think is fantastic. It's told in the distinctive voices of both Bernice and Annie, so there are dual POVs. So how important though was it to tell their story in first person versus third?
I just love first person. First person is my happy place. And I thought about writing it in third because there seems something like so like serious and dressed up about doing third person, but I loved their southern voices and I loved showing how these are two people who grew up in the same small town, they're the same age, but their voices are different because they are different. I'm very interested in teasing out the diversity in between characters who some people may think are the same, but they're not.
Well, with Annie, you also treat us to epistolary sections. So please tell us what led to your decision to structure the book in that beautiful, concise, very concise, and heartfelt way.
Well, one, I love to write letters. If you could see this whole desk, all my like Christmas Letters are like right here. I write letters, I mail letters. I am
So
personally,
handwritten.
yes, I am
Oh,
personally
wow.
USPS in business. That is all me. But for the sake of the story, our girls take literally two paths. One leaves home and goes to Atlanta, where she attends Spelman College, and the other travels to Memphis because she has heard a rumor that perhaps her mother is there. So they're far apart, and I needed to say, how do they stay in touch? And they can't pick up the phone. People don't remember this, but long distance calls used to be outrageously expensive. The phone itself was expensive. And so they occasionally communicate via letter. And I enjoy writing because I like writing letters, but it's also important to me that we create a paper trail of a longstanding history of Black literacy. People were literate, and people also wrote letters for others who weren't literate. These letters are in many ways, our legacy. My mother has all the letters with which my granddaddy courted my grandmother because they lived about 10
Oh.
miles away. And if you're on foot, that you might as well be in another state. And so he wrote her these beautiful letters. And I even borrowed one of his sentences, which was, I have crossed the bridge of love. I have crossed the river of love and burned the bridge behind me.
Oh, that is beautiful.
I put
Wow.
I like to do winks in the story. Like even my own mother was active in the civil rights movement as a 15-year-old. She participated in a daily sit-in for the whole summer. They sat in at a drugstore every day. And then when school started, they sat in on the weekends. So I make a reference to that history. That's my gift to my mother, but also it's my way of kind of enshrining that history into our fictional record as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Wasn't your mother recently honored for that very thing?
Yes, all these years later, they built wonderful, beautiful statues to honor these young people. So this like the statue looks like the lunch counter, and there is a model of a bronze statue for each of them.
Oh, wow. Oh, that just gives me like goosebumps. That's wonderful.
History is all around us. History might have fixed you a bowl of oatmeal when you were a little girl.
Well, you mentioned that Annie and Bernice go entirely different directions. So what's the biggest message that you want the readers to take away from their choices and significantly different situations?
I feel like I don't know what I want people to take away from their choices. I feel like in all my books, I want readers to feel empathy for people. I'm not a judgmental writer and I don't try to cultivate a judgmental reader in that way. I try to show the complexities of what choices people make, the choices also of what's available to them. I think that one thing that is important to me in reading this book is looking at how many things we take for granted were not available such a short time ago. I was struck by the way women's lives were shaped by the absence of safe, effective contraception. I think we forget about that. I was born in 1970. So I was born after the pill was invented. But back in the 50s, man, people were just rolling the dice. Like when you could not control your fertility, you cannot control your life. And even just look at Annie's grandmother. She cannot control her life because her children can't control their fertility. And so like babies were just coming from all different directions and just determining people's routes in life. So I think that was one thing I wanted to become aware of the things that we take for granted, not just long distance calls and access to washing machines and dryers, access to control over our bodies.
Well, many of the conflicts you describe for Black women still exist today. So, in these current days of erasure attempts and book bans and all the stuff, are you concerned about the impact of these efforts on your work?
I'm concerned about the impacts of these efforts, not on my work in particular. Like I don't know. I don't think that my work is any more important than anyone else's work. I'm really more concerned about the assault on reading in general. there's not one book that's so important that it must be preserved. The idea that reading is under assault, and that also I believe by banning books by particular authors, like to say to ban books by queer authors and say they're inappropriate for children, that is saying to that author, your life is an obscenity. And to those children who may have that same lifestyle, you are obscene. That is the most demeaning thing you can do to someone, to say your story is not worthy. What happened to you is inappropriate. It should be kept behind closed doors. It's not fit for a wholesome place like a library. That is the way these book bannings not only declare war on literacy, but on people's lives and their understanding of who they are. It's so empowering to see your life depicted in story, to be worthy of being between two covers.
So you would still encourage those authors to keep writing, keep telling their stories, correct?
I mean, absolutely, we have to keep telling our stories. I do think that we have had the luxury of forgetting about how writing is, in fact, a struggle. I think that we have forgotten how powerful words are, and that is why they're under assault. And so, of course, I mean, I tell people to keep writing. I know people who want to stop writing because they don't feel the marketplace is there for them. And I say, I'm sorry, did you decide you wanted to be a writer for a market, or did you decide you wanted to be a writer because you knew what stories could do? That's still true. So we just have to keep writing. I put in my Christmas cards to people, we have to keep writing these books faster than they can ban them.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point.
And
I
that's
think
easy for me to say since it took me 7 years. But you get
it took you 7 years to write this book?
It took me 7 years. It took me so long to. This is actually not the book that I had promised my publisher. I promised him a contemporary novel set in Atlanta, but these characters, Nisi and Annie, they just kept popping up, and I thought, oh, maybe this is the backstory for my real story. And then they were like, no, girl, we are the real story. And I just had to be humble and follow that.
I love that. I love that. Do you still plan to do the other book that you thought you were going to
I have let go of what of plans. What do they say? Man plan, God plan better. I mean, I will write whatever comes to me next. I mean, it was very stressful to me in trying to write this book because I also, during 2020, I lost some of my belief in writing. Writing I do believe that books change the world, but it's such a long game. And I felt like the world was on fire. And I was like, who am I to do something long? Well, like, we need to do something immediate. But I had to accept that writing, this is what I have. Since this is Christmas season, I'll say, like the little drummer boy, this is my rumpa pum pum. And I just had to play
do?
my drum, and that's what I have. And that got me back into the writing, but I had to do it. When I was young, I wrote like, I'm going to write this book and change the world right now. And now I had to say, this is my offering. I hope that it helps.
It definitely does. I have enjoyed reading it. And I know many, many authors, and they all dream consistently, they all dream of walking into a library and finding their book next to yours on a display. So, my question is, whose book or books would you like librarians to put your book next to, and why?
Well, this is not going to be, it's going to be so predictable, but I can't help it because it is the truth of my heart, which is that I would love to be anywhere near Toni Morrison. In many ways, even Ken is, Morrison has that story on Recitatif about the two girls.
Mhm.
One's mother is dead, one mother ran away. That I echo that. And Ken, every book I write, I make some sort of wink to her. Someone told me that Ken, this is so funny. They said Ken is like if Sula and Beaches had a baby.
Well, now that you said that, I totally see that. I can see it. That is true. That's wonderful. Okay. Well, we have some questions from our audience before I get to my last one. Okay. Donna says, could you talk about the male characters in this book, especially Franklin?
Oh, I had such fun writing the fellas. Franklin, when I was a child, there was a neighbor down the street on the corner on the left by the hill, and the husband was a survivor of polio. And, and these diseases are coming back because of all the things rolling back with our medical care. And so I was interested in just in that as a cultural marker, but I was also interested in portraying a man who, he's disabled, he walks with a cane, but that is her man, that is her husband. Like I wanted a diverse group of people in this story and not have people cast to type. Like Franklin is not inspirational. He is her man, and he happens to have this cane, and he is challenged by it. It's part of his efforts to impress his father because he feels like he's not the same as his brothers. But his disability informs who he is, but it does not define who he is, and it does not detract from his like va va voom. That was also important to me.
Excellent. Okay, we have another question. This is from Denise. Um, who are your literary heroes and who are you reading now?
Like I said, for me, it is Morrison all day. And I just wrote an introduction to the new edition of Song of Solomon. I've read that book 100 times and it broke me down like I did not know what was going to happen. I love Morrison because she is not afraid of plot. She is not afraid of politics and she worships language. She does all the things. Let's see, what am I reading right now? I'm looking on my shelf. I mean, I just finished Happy Land by Dolan Perkins Valdez, and it was such a pleasure. I felt like it was a story I needed right now. I just felt like I was being wrapped up in an affirming blanket with a plot.
Oh, love that. Okay. Well, any final words for this audience, who are mostly educators and librarians? Anything you want to say to them?
Well, one thing I do want to say is, of course, thank you for your service. But I also want to say this because I suspect there are people in this audience who have aspirations to write and who may not be writing. I cannot stand it when writers tell people you have to write every day because when you say that, it completely leaves out so many people with important, meaningful lives that have a lot to say. And so I just want people to know, think about the things that keep you from writing. You have to work. You got to take care of your kids. You might have to take care of elders. You have so much to do, but all these things that keep you from writing are also the things that enrich your writing. So don't think of them so much as a problem or a disadvantage. These are your superpowers. I don't want to read a book by someone who has nothing to do but write. I want to read a book by someone who's in the world. So if you can write regularly, not every day, just 3 times a week. I tell people this, I write 3 times a week. I write when other people are at the gym. That's enough time to get that story going. You can do this, and we need the stories from your busy life.
I love that. Have you ever considered collaborating with anyone? I'm sure you get that request a lot, but have you
Oh,
ever considered doing that?
no, ma'am. I don't. I'm solo on this. I just I can't even imagine it. I did collaborate on a screenplay one time and it was a lot of fun, but no, I don't want to do it again. Nope, nope, nope. Mm-mm.
And that's
But I
because
tell people writing is solitary, but life is not. Other people support me as I'm doing my writing, even though they're not on the page. I just have to be there with with my little me and my mind. We just have to be by ourselves. That's why I do it at 5 in the morning because nobody else is up.
you write at 5 in the morning.
It's a great time. You don't need to have any boundaries because nobody's bothering you. I don't have good boundaries. People call me, I'll leave and go do what they want to do. But at 5 in the morning, that is not a problem.
And how long do you write? From 5 until
7:30.
that's wonderful. These are this such great advice for
Well,
writers.
I'm happy to give the advice because I want more stories. Like I'm a teacher, and I always say my goal is to have my students write the next draft. That's my goal, to inspire them to return and make it better. That's art. We need to have more stories out here, not less. So we need to encourage everyone to pick up their pen or their computer or their iPad, whatever they do, Let's get these stories told because people need to know it. Pearl Clegg, my mentor, always said to me, as a writer, your job is to tell the people the truth.
Yes, fiction always has kernels of truth in it, right?
It's true, it's the emotional truth of things.
Yes, yes. Well, Ken is extraordinary. For those
You.
in our audience, it really is. It's my favorite book that I've read this year, and that's saying a lot because I read a lot.
It's the end of the year.
For this whole that I've read this whole year. So yes, and that's saying a lot. I've had a lot of favorites, but this is the favorite of mine. So everyone, if you haven't read it, this definitely read this book. Are there other books of yours that you feel if there's some people out there have been, living under a rock and they haven't read any of your books yet, what would you recommend they start with?
I don't know. My favorite of my books is Silver Sparrow. It is my favorite. It's about two girls who have their father is a bigamist. One knows, one doesn't know. And so I guess I must like these kind of sister act stories. I hadn't really thought about it until right now, but I like them all. Every one I wrote, I feel like I feel like I had kind of divine purpose in writing each. And I'm just grateful that these stories are in the world.
We're grateful too. We're grateful for all your works. So thank you so much, Tayari. And thanks to everyone in this audience for joining us. Tayari, much love to you.
Well, thank
And
you.
and since I live in the same town you do, I'll be at your next event to
Yes,
support this book.
please. Please come out. We're going to have a
I'll
great
bring my
time.
friends. I'll bring my friends, because they'll
Perfect.
appreciate this book too.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming and for all your essential work. I feel that librarians and educators, you all do what Alice Walker calls the unglamorous work of the revolutionary.
That's big work. That's top work. All right. Well, next we have two concurrent panels, Magic and Love and YA Lit, and She Writes Dangerously. Thanks again, Tayari. Thanks again, audience. We hope you all enjoy the remainder of this year's Penguin Random House Winter Book and Author Festival. Bye. Thank you.